Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are just about to begin our first full off season as general manager of the Oakland Athletics. The 2024 season was certainly better than anticipated for the A's. We weren't really trying to compete all that hard, but at 77 and 85, we improved 27 games from where they were in 2023. So that is the positive takeaway from this season, but it's not all good news. Being realistic, we far outperformed our Pythagorean expectations of 66 and 96, and we have the worst offense in the American League by almost every significant metric. And our pitching staff ended up being pretty mediocre overall as well, ranking 11th in runs allowed. Had one of the worst defensive teams in the American League. We did steal a lot of bases, thank you to Ruiz for that. But it's not a great roster. The positive thing about it not being a great roster is that it's not a particularly expensive roster. And it's also a roster that we're probably going to make some pretty significant changes to this offseason. I think it's conceivable that by the time we get to the start of the 2025 season, half of the 26-man roster will be different than it was at the end of this season. So as we traditionally do in our OOTP playthrough series, we're going to take a look at what this team looks like as this offseason begins, examine how everyone performed over this past season, and start providing some initial thoughts about who we might want to bring back and who we will likely be moving on from. If you've got thoughts on any of these decisions, I would love to hear them in the comments as well. Clark Schmidt will be back. You may remember we bought out his arbitration years as well as up to 3 of his free agent years earlier this season. We may have paid at the top of the market for that. I think he had about 10 wins at that point and only won 1 game over the last 2+ months of the season. But at 11 and 10 record with a 4.59 ERA, 2.6 WAR, had, I believe, the best season of any of our A's starters this year. And the money for him is not going to be incredible for the next few years, so he will certainly be back. J.P. Sears, 10 and 14 record, 5.03 ERA. Not a great season by any means, but he is a left-hander, and despite the fact that he gave up 20 home runs this year and 34 home runs a year ago, we do tend to think at some point that perhaps he'll do a little better, even though he's got those extreme fly ball tendencies, pitching half of his games in Oakland, although hasn't been proven thus far over the first 2.5 years of his career in Oakland. He's set to make the major league minimum next year, 2 option years left. Certainly would expect that he'll be in the mix to be in the rotation again. One guy who certainly won't be back is the veteran on the team, 30-year-old Paul Blackburn. Ended up $3.5 million, one of our highest paid players this year, and he's set to make about $4.5 million next year, probably a little more than that. We have already started shopping him. We've got a potential trade involving him out there that hopefully we'll hear back on in the next day or two. But after going 6 and 19 with an ERA of over 6, he's going to be 31 soon. His stuff is already below average. At the price tag that he will be at next year, Blackburn will not be back. Mitch Spence had a solid rookie year, 9 and 9, 4.72 ERA, 9.3 strikeouts per 9 innings, a 2.2 WAR. He's making the major league minimum. He's got that captain personality. He will be back. And then Kyle Muller, another relatively young player, 8 and 9 with a 4.95 ERA, so he was certainly better this year than he was a year ago. Another guy who's going to be making the major league minimum next year, so he should be in the mix for a rotation spot, or if not that, a spot in the bullpen. So Other than Blackburn, I do think just based on the economics of Oakland, we're probably going to have the other 4 pitchers back with us, most likely in the starting rotation. If we're somehow able to land a couple of interesting starters via free agency, the Rule 5, the trade market, it's possible that a Muller or a Sears perhaps ends up in the bullpen. But right now I would expect 4 of the 5 starters from our rotation to be back. Mason Miller will likely be back unless someone blows us away with a trade offer. He was involved in a lot this year. 36 saves, 9 wins, 11 losses. So when something was happening with Oakland, odds were that Mason Miller was in the middle of it. 191 ERA, 95 strikeouts, and 75 in the third innings. The only negatives on his resume: did allow 7 home runs and also allowed 44 walks. Still was a very useful player. Some of you have commented in previous episodes we should think about him to be in the starting rotation or perhaps as a stopper. And we're investigating the potential of both of those things this offseason. When we're talking about Mason Miller, probably a good time for me to stop by the development lab and let you know what we've got brewing here in this 2024 offseason. We are going to do some endurance training with Mason Miller. If that goes really well, maybe we try him as a starter, see if we can consistently get 5 solid innings out of him. Even if it doesn't work incredibly well, he could very well end up as a stopper next year for us instead of a closer. Hopefully we can add another arm or 2 to help the bullpen. And if we can get more innings out of Miller in the stopper role, that may be more valuable for a team like the A's than a closer role where there could be times where we're not going to be using him for days and days on end. Eschery Ruiz and Oswaldo Cabrera both working on plate discipline. Mitch Spence and Clark Schmidt, 2 of our better starters, working on increasing their pitch movement. Austin Meadows focused on plate discipline. He's about the oldest player that we're going to have going through the training here, but he is a player with high work ethic, and he, along with Clark Schmidt, is a player that we signed to an extension this year, so we think he's likely to be with us for the medium term. So we're going to do everything possible to ensure that he can improve. And then our last 2 spots are going to go for more prospects. Duncan Marston, who was our first-round pick, number 4 overall in the recent draft. I'm going to work on him improving his control. And then Daryl Hernandez, going to focus on plate discipline with him. He is likely to be in the mix to be on the 26-man roster. Actually, it's almost a certainty that he will be on the 26-man roster last year after he's hit over 300 the last 2 seasons between AA and primarily AAA. The only question with him is what position he's going to be playing. He's very versatile, not necessarily an incredible defensive infielder or outfielder, but he is a guy who can play in a lot of spots. So hopefully we'll set him up so he can draw some more walks. We got a lot of guys working on plate discipline. Don't necessarily know that we've got the greatest hitters in the world on our team. In fact, I'm 100% confident that we don't have the greatest hitters in the world on our team. But if we can start developing a roster that's going to work the count and hopefully as a whole generate a few extra walks a game, that could ultimately help us win some games down the line. Back to the rest of the pitching staff. Taylor Rogers, who we picked up in a trade with the Giants, will be back with us next year. The Giants picked up his salary, so even though he wasn't good, he is a very economical left-hander for us out of the pen, and would certainly expect that he'll perform better than he did this year. Although he did have that 5.65 ERA, his FIP minus and his Sierra both indicate that he probably got a bit unlucky to have an ERA that high. Scott McGuff really did a nice job for us, a 2.45 ERA over 47 and 2/3 innings. The issue is we've got a team option for him for $4 million, and I don't know that we're willing to exercise that. Although, I'm trying to figure out, we did get the Diamondbacks to retain his salary this year. I wouldn't think that that applies to next season, but it is kind of weird that it still shows up there. I'll have to go back and figure out exactly how that works. Daniel Hudson did a really nice job for us, a 3.03 ERA, well over a strikeout per inning, but he's going to be 38 years old before the season starts. We claimed him on waivers from the Dodgers. He did a nice job in our bullpen, but we'll likely be wishing him well as he tries to continue his major league career next year. Luis Gil was disappointing, 4.48 ERA, did strike out 96 batters in 72 and a third innings, but he also gave up a ridiculous 16 homers, and he walked 43 batters. The lack of control and the extreme fly ball tendencies definitely not working incredibly well for him. Not sure whether he will be back with us or not. Scott Efros, another former Yankee. You'll see a common theme here, as some of you have noted in the comment section to previous episodes. Did well for us when he finally got into the lineup for us in the month of September. He is a guy who still has 2 option years left. Only going to be making around $1 million next year. I think we'll likely have him back in the bullpen. Clayton Beeter, similar story. He was up just very briefly at the end of the year, but with his profile and 3 option years left making the major league minimum, he'll certainly be competing for a roster spot as well. Joe Boyle probably won't be back. There's a few things to really like about Joe Boyle. He throws triple digits. He has incredible stuff, extreme ground ball tendencies. But I have a difficult time with people who are pitchers and don't have a lot of control. And he walked 54 batters in 81 and 2/3 innings. He's a guy that we may look to see if there's some trade value in him. Does have 3 option years left, still making the major league minimum. I think there's probably some teams that will value his incredible stuff more than we do, given the penalty that I put on bringing him back, given the lack of control. Ken Waldichuk, a couple long stints on the IL this year, was respectable in a small sample size. The left-hander, 3 option years left, making the major league minimum. Certainly should be in the mix to be a lefty out of the bullpen. And then last, but probably not least, is Sean Newcomb, 31 years old now. Arbitration eligible, set to make close to $1.5 million a year. Another guy whose control is certainly at the level that it's a concern for me. 4.60 ERA over 31 and a third innings pitched. With the money he's set to make, I tend to think we'll probably be moving on from him, but you never know. And as mid as that analysis of our pitching staff was, the situation with our everyday players is much more dire. Trey Barrera, picked him up as a minor league free agent signing right at the end of spring training. Hit 250 and 91 at-bats for us. He could, I guess, be in the mix to be brought back next year as a backup catcher. Shea Langelier is kind of getting to be a difficult decision for me. Hit a .194, which was down from where he was a year ago. He did have 17 homers and 366 at-bats. I like that pop for a catcher. But when all was said and done, he still put up a 72 WRC plus, and he wasn't even a win above replacement level, despite the fact that he's a respectable defensive catcher. Still making the major league minimum, still with 3 option years left. So I think it's likely that Barrera or Langeliers will be back. My hope is that we'll have one of them back in a backup catcher role, and we'll have someone better than either of them behind the plate. We did make the trade with the Mets for Omar Narvaez right before the trade deadline. He hit .221 with no homers and 131 at-bats for us. Was pretty bad offensively and barely above replacement level despite his good defense. He is headed to free agency. I am assuming he's looking for some decent money. He has $7 million a year for 3 years. That is not an amount that we will be giving to Narvi. So he will be heading somewhere else. So catcher, a spot that will be hopefully able to track down a starter who's better than Shea or Trey. Lewin Diaz, another minor league free agent signing, split the year between Las Vegas and Oakland, and he put up a 101 WRC plus in Oakland, 8 homers, 28 ribbies, and 196 at-bats. Probably in the mix to be on our roster again next year, still has options left, making the major league minimum. Ryan Noda, another left-handed hitting first baseman. When he was out with an injury, that's what allowed Lewin Diaz to get that playing time. Noda, 104 WRC plus, was also reasonably effective despite the 236 average. Did have 12 doubles, 13 homers, perhaps most importantly, the 55 walks. He's one of the players that already has a pretty good eye, even though, as I noted, we're working on a plate discipline with several of our other players this offseason. He is a guy with arbitration years left, still making the major league minimum. So he's in the mix to be back as well. Hard to imagine both of those guys will make the 26-man roster, but it'll be nice insurance to have one of them in AAA. Elvis Andrus, common theme here, another minor league free agent signing who played a prominent role for us. Hit just .216 on the year, 61 WRC plus, and he was well below replacement level. He is 36 years old now. Guessing he's looking for more than a minimum contract, $2.3 million a year over 3 years. At his age, coming off the performance that he came off, probably will not be back. As much as I like former Yankees, Miguel Andujar may end up being one and done with Oakland. Barely hit 200, only 2 homers and 158 at-bats, 56 WRC plus, not a particularly good defensive player. Set to make around $2.5 million next year in arbitration. I think he's someone we're likely to shop in the coming weeks, and if we can get anything of value back in return that's not making the same kind of money, so likely a minor leaguer or a player on the major league minimum with some options left, we'll probably take that for Andujar. Oswaldo Cabrera likely will be back. Like his defensive versatility and his skill defensively, he wasn't much better than a lot of these other infielders we talked about, with a 68 WRC plus on the year, only slightly above replacement level. Did have 16 homers for us, but it was also in 533 at-bats, as he was a pretty regular fixture in our lineup. In a perfect world, I'd love for him to be a utility infielder for us. We'll have to see how the offseason goes. It's conceivable he could still be starting another 130 or 140 games for us next year. Tyler Nevin split the year between AAA and the majors, hit just a .174 in the majors. Not great defensively, a right-handed hitter without incredible power. He's acceptable offensively against lefties, not very good against righties. He's out of option years at this point. I think he's likely out of Oakland after this season as well. And then the final infielder, Nick Allen. Love the personality, love the defense. The bat is the potential concern. He did hit .246 this year, which was a 25-point improvement from a year ago. 64 WRC plus, also the best mark of his career. Similar to Cabrera, I don't mind having Allen on the roster. but I'd prefer that guys like Cabrera and Allen were starting 50 games a year as opposed to 130 plus games a year. But Allen, with option years left, making the major league minimum, is certainly going to once again be in the mix to be on our roster in 2025. Turning to our outfielders, Austin Meadows, already mentioned that we signed him to an extension. He put up a 105 WRC plus for us this year, so was a little bit above average as an offensive player. 2.2 WAR, 28 doubles, 4 triples, 19 homers. The batting average only 241, on base percentage of 322. Not an incredible offensive player, but on this Oakland A's team, he is the best hitter we have, for better or for worse, most likely for worse given our offense. But if we can have him in the lineup every day against right-handed pitching, and we can hopefully have this team with a few decent guys come April to potentially platoon with him so he doesn't have to play much against left-handed pitching, I think there's still some value there, because when we look at the season, 105 WRC plus, but against lefties, he was absolutely brutal. 33 WRC plus, hit just a $138 and almost 100 at-bats. Whereas against right-handed pitching, he put up a 122 WRC plus, 814 OPS. Just a matter of minimizing, hopefully, how often we have to have him facing left-handed pitching. Sam Haggerty, the next guy to look at, hit 264, one of the better batting averages on our team. 7 homers, 43 ribbies, pretty much league average in terms of his OPS plus and his WRC plus. Put up almost a 2 WAR. Set to make $2 million next year, though, in arbitration. I like that he's a switch hitter. He's competent defensively. He does have a little bit of speed. He was 33 for 37 on the base paths. But at $2 million, we've got some guys making potentially the major league minimum in AAA who I think could potentially fill the spot that he filled if he had had a bigger year for us and he put up 110 plus WRC plus. I think we might be more likely to bring him back, but he's on the wrong side of 30, starting to make pretty decent money. And that may be the sign, if he's not a real difference maker, that we need to move on from him in Oakland. Eschery Ruiz led the league with 54 steals this year, 92 WRC plus, 2.5 WAR. I know that some of you have been suggesting that perhaps we investigate trading him, hope that maybe there's a team out there that is attracted by his incredible speed. It's something that I'll investigate this offseason. I do like the fact that he is a competent defensive center fielder. He does give us that speed dimension. Just don't know if he's going to get on base consistently enough for us to take advantage of that. These batting averages in the mid-250s and on-base percentages in the low 300s. I may end up putting my foot in my mouth here, but I think those numbers are somewhat Vince Coleman reminiscent. Coleman obviously had some brilliant seasons very early in his career with the Cardinals, but once he settled in and kind of found his level as a guy getting on base, his fleetness of foot on the base paths was less value when he was barely getting on base 30% of the time. And I just looked it up. I actually wasn't too far off. Vince Coleman's career batting average was 264, and his career on-base percentage was 324. So he's definitely in the same neighborhood as Ruiz. And Coleman's third season in the majors was probably the best of his career. He had a career best 363 on-base percentage in 1987. And after that, he had some years in his career where the on-base percentage was below 300, looking at his record in 94 when he moved on to the Royals from the Mets, and then the last couple years of his career in 96 and 97, his on-base percentages were below 300 as well. So I don't think he's the worst analogy for Ruiz, because like Coleman, Ruiz is certainly off to a pretty impressive start in his career. Only he hasn't led the league in steals 6 consecutive years like Vince Coleman did to begin his career, including those 300-plus stolen base seasons from 85 through 87 with those Cardinals teams that liked to run. So long story short, for the time being, Ruiz is probably with us, but if someone is really willing to blow us away with an offer for him, we'd certainly consider moving on. JJ Bleday, 207 average, 77 WRC plus as a guy primarily playing a corner outfield spot. Not really what we're looking for. Does have 3 option years left, is still making the major league minimum. Could he be in the mix to be on the 40-man roster and have to fight for a 26-man roster spot? Certainly, but it's also conceivable that we just move on from him this offseason. I think the most interesting decision to me is Seth Brown, who had a 106 OPS plus, 101 WRC plus for us, but did hit 29 home runs, drove in 71 runs. Pretty effective with the power bat that he has against right-handed pitching. Similar to Meadows, would prefer for him not to be playing against left-handed pitching. He's heading into arbitration, number expected to be about $3.8 million. I tend to think, since he really is a relatively one-dimensional guy who only hits home runs, strikes out a lot, and doesn't hit for an incredibly high average, we probably will move on from him. $3.5 to $4 million a year for him is just a little more than I think our A's can afford. But another guy who we'll see how the trade market looks in the coming days before we get to the arbitration period. Maybe someone will blow us away with a trade offer for him, or maybe we decide, hey, we're going to move on from Haggerty, we're going to move on from Bleday, and we decide, okay, we'll keep Seth Brown around. And then when we look at our AAA team, we've got guys like Denzel Clark, Lawrence Butler, who could be in the mix to be on the 26-man roster as outfielders next year as well. So taking a look at the arbitration eligible players, we've talked through a lot of these guys. Abraham Toro actually ended up finishing the season in AAA Las Vegas. Hard to imagine that we're going to want to spend $2 million on him. Zach Jackson is going to be basically out for all of next year with a torn labrum, so we're certainly not going to offer him anything. But a lot of these guys we could look to move on from in trade, so I think that's what we're going to focus on the next couple of days. It's conceivable we'll end up making offers to a few of these guys to come back on the team, but my hope is that maybe others see a diamond in the rough or perhaps a little trade value in some of these guys that we're inclined to move on from. Obviously, we're not going to make $18.9 million qualifying offers to either Elvis Andrus or Daniel Hudson. Narvaez and Piscotty also have likely played their last games in Oakland, and we don't even really have very many minor league free agents that we're going to be looking to bring back this offseason as we start turning this roster over from the major leagues all the way down to the rookie leagues in the international complex. And Scooter McGuff has very limited trade value. We talked about that. I feel like the team options, the retained salary does not apply for, so I think we would be on the hook for that. If I'm wrong, I'm sure one of you will remind me of that fact in the comment section. In fact, it's possible several of you may remind me of that fact in the comment section to the video. But at $4 million next year, even though he was pretty good for us, we're going to go ahead and void that last contract year, see what McGuff is actually looking for on the open market. And he's looking for a little less than that. So if we do decide to reunite with him, we might be able to do it at a better price than we would have had him for. And we've also decided to shop Seth Brown. You'll see that Dylan Moore, well, I've seen this. You're only seeing this with the second player that we've offered, but he's about the only guy that we can get for a lot of these borderline arbitration eligible players. The fact that we actually have some offers from the Cardinals for Brown gives me at least a few guys to look into. Maybe we'll end up bringing one of these guys onto our team. I do kind of feel that between the Rule 5 draft and the lower end of free agency, we probably can find somebody who will give us production pretty similar to what we got from Seth Brown for less money if we're patient and thoughtful and perhaps a bit lucky. And I'm not really thrilled with any of the players we can pick up from the Cardinals, but Zach Thompson is a left-handed arm making the major league minimum, still has an option year left next year, and he looks like a guy who could start for us or could relieve for us. He's got some positive influences in the clubhouse. Given that my thought is we can find a replacement for Brown who will give us league average type of offensive production for less than the close to $4 million he's likely to make next year, we're going to go ahead and try to trade him to the Cardinals. We'll see if maybe they can give us a little bit more, but getting Seth Brown off our books will still be positive in general. You can see we don't have a ton of financial flexibility right now, but we're certainly not going to be bringing back all of these arbitration eligible players, and we're probably not even going to be bringing back all of the guys who make the major league minimum. So with this trade that we're trying to do here, as well as hopefully some other trades, could be an opportunity for us to open up a little more cash. I don't think we're going to be in the market for Juan Soto as much as that's exactly what this offense would need, but hopefully we'll have enough money where we can play to the lower to middle end of the market and perhaps play on the free agent market in February and March when it gets a little cheaper and add a little bit of talent that can help this offense in particular hopefully be better next year than they were this past season. And we couldn't get much more from the Cardinals, but they did throw in $150,000, and for a team like Oakland, that's not meaningless. And I had mentioned that Dylan Moore was a guy who seemed to be popping up every time we were shopping players, and we made a couple of different proposals to Seattle for him. We're going to send Blackburn to Seattle for him. As I mentioned, we're not going to be spending $4.5 million a year on a guy in his 30s with below average stuff coming off of a year with an ERA of over 6. Doesn't seem like the best investment. We have to add in either a pretty useful player or some of our middle 20s aged prospects. So we're going to throw in a mid-20 age prospect, likely the left-handed pitcher Jack Owen, who is 26 and his stuff is pretty brutal. And they're going to retain the contract for Dylan Moore's last year of his contract. I don't think he's a great player. Those of you who watched us with the Seattle miniseries that we did a few weeks ago know that I think we, if I remember correctly, moved on from him after the first year in Seattle. So it's kind of odd that I'm taking him in Oakland after that first year in Seattle now. But it's a riskless move for us if they're going to handle that $3.5 million on his contract next year. He is a very versatile player. He does have good speed, and there is a little pop in his bat. He hit below 200, so he'll fit right in with a lot of these guys on the Oakland A's. But because he is pretty good on the base paths, does have some extra base power and some home run power, put up an 86 WRC plus, which, as you noted, for an infielder on these Oakland A's is actually a decent number. He's also a right-handed bat, so we could get him into a situation where we're playing him only against left-handed pitching as a starter and then using him as a utility guy who can basically play anywhere on the field except for catcher after that, for the other 120 or so games a year. So to me, it's kind of a riskless thing. We throw in a very mid prospect, get Blackburn's contract off our books, and we get a free look at Dylan Moore for next year. If he doesn't end up making the 26-man roster, it's not going to cost us anything because the Mariners are keeping that contract. And you can see what I've been talking about here, starting to generate a little bit more money available to spend this upcoming offseason, which should help us. We're still in a difficult situation, taking a look at some of the market dynamics. Our market size still tiny. Fan loyalty still pathetic. Both of those metrics didn't move at all. We did get somewhat more fan interest with the solid year that we had on the field in the race for the wild card until the last week of the season. We started off at a 15 this past March, and we're at a 33 right now. I know those numbers are both horrible, but I'm trying to put the optimistic spin on things, and we more than doubled our fan interest this year. Sounds like something I would put on a resume. Do people even do resumes anymore? Or is it all just electronic and LinkedIn? And trying to shop some of the other arbitration-eligible players, and you see Abraham Toro. We've got the opportunity to take back a mid-sized contract on a pretty mediocre player, so we'll probably just be making no offer to Toro and let him hit free agency rather than spend a couple $1 million on him next year. Given that he split the year between AAA and the majors for us already, and we did just make that trade for Dylan Moore, who could probably play a similar role on our team for no money this upcoming year. And it's a very familiar-looking list for Andujar on the trade market as well, so we'll just make a $0 offer to him also, and we're likely going to be moving on from most of these arbitration-eligible players. We are going to make an offer to Efros. Still got to figure out Newcomb and Haggerty, but Jackson, Toro, and Andujar are all going to be parts of different organizations next year, and getting the arbitration estimates for these players ultimately off of our books when we go through the arbitration period and the beginning of free agency will free up a little bit more money that hopefully we will use wisely this offseason. And the trade market's a little better for the center fielder Sam Haggerty, who is, we talked about, set to make about $2 million next year. I think we're going to trade him to the Tigers for Andy Ibanez. Ibanez, right-handed hitting infielder, pretty versatile, brings a high work ethic. He's making the major league minimum, has one option year left, so he's most likely just organizational depth for us, but I think he's probably a guy who will have similar offensive production when all is said and done to what we'd get from Haggerty. Also a guy who can play multiple positions, although I don't think he's quite the defensive outfielder that Haggerty is. But he's going to cost us about $1.3 million less. So I think that's the way we're going to go. And as we move forward another day, we've been investigating the trade market, and we just kind of get that usual crew of 3 or 4 or 5 overpriced players for many of the guys that we've been shopping. So we have waived and DFA'd a number of the players that we talked about earlier. If someone wants to claim them, that's fine, but we don't want to be guaranteeing them major league contracts next year. So I think between that, the trades that we've made to get a couple of players off of our books, the fact that in arbitration at this point, F. Ross is the only guy that we're going to offer to, we should end up clearing a decent amount of additional money. As I said, we're not going to be players for any big free agents, and we're going to have a lot of holes to fill with all of the players that we're moving on from. But we are going to start trying to reshape this team in our vision. And we've simmed ahead a few more days to the start of award season, not expecting there to be many awards for the A's. And these two are a bit surprising. We got 2 Gold Glove winners despite having that awful defense that we talked about at the start of the episode. But Austin Meadows in left field and Oswaldo Cabrera at third base both win Gold Gloves here for the Oakland A's in 2024. And not surprisingly, other than those 2 Gold Gloves, no Oakland A's were award winners. Thought we might get a little bit of play for Mr. Spence as far as Rookie of the Year voting. He did win a Rookie of the Month award, but he didn't even get any consideration there. AL Cy Young Award, Shane Bieber, 15-7 with a 2.61 ERA. Unfortunately, had elbow surgery late in the season, and he's going to be out for about 6 months, so he'll probably miss the start of spring training. Over in the National League, Justin Steele, your unanimous Cy Young Award winner, 18-8 with a 3.08 ERA, 256 strikeouts. Adley Rutschman is your unanimous American League MVP, 353 batting average, Joe Mauer-like, 35 home runs and 89 ribbies, Mike Piazza-like. Juan Soto of the Yankees was 4th, Wyatt Langford of the Rangers 3rd, and J-Rod of the Mariners 2nd in the voting. No Oakland A's receiving votes, not surprisingly. And over in the National League, Austin Riley, split decision, but 294 average, 43 homers, and 132 ribbies from the third baseman, enough to beat his teammate Michael Harris II, Jackson Merrill of the Padres, and Shohei Ohtani, all of whom received first place votes. And we've made it to the free agent filings. We'll take a look at those shortly. We've got $40 million to spend this offseason, so in theory we can be a player for just about anybody, but between the players we traded away, the players we waived and DFA'd, and the players we just did not end up offering any money in salary arbitration to, we've only got a payroll of $21 million, which is positive, but we don't have anywhere near 26 players on major league salaries, and quite honestly, we probably hope that a good chunk of these players start the year in AAA. So we're going to need to probably add 10 players through free agency, through trades, through the Rule 5 draft, through any other method that we can come up with. Now, we do have a little bit of money to spend, which is positive, as I noted, but we've got a lot of players that we're going to need to spend those on to rebuild this roster and hopefully over time rebuild this entire organization. International free agents, take a quick look and see if there's anyone who stands out according to our scout. Starting pitcher Masanori Tanaka looks like he could be a useful pitcher. Unfortunately, he's already signed with the Orioles organization before we got a chance to even talk to him. Relief pitcher Jesus Dump Truck Soto looks like he could be a useful lefty out of the bullpen, but he's looking for almost $7 million a year I think we'll scout Soto to get to know him a little better, but going to have his price come down pretty significantly. Vicente Soto, second baseman, 21 years old. Not an incredible prospect, but we'll offer him a minor league contract, and we'll also request a scouting report on him. But not the most inspiring class of international free agents. Major league free agents, though, definitely some interesting names. Willy Adames, Juan Soto, Justin Verlander, the aforementioned Bieber. The good news for him is he won the Cy Young Award as he hits free agency. The bad news is he's coming off of elbow surgery. Gleyber Torres, Matt Chapman, Blake Snell. So certainly players that could help our team. Many players who could help our team. And as I noted, right now we're set to maybe spend about $60 million-ish on payroll next year, which will be a big bump from the $40 million-ish we were this year. But most of the big names on the market are looking for a huge chunk of that money, and I don't think that's necessarily the area of the market where we will be playing. If one of these higher-end free agents happens to linger on the market for a while, could certainly see ourselves getting involved with one or two of them come February or March. But otherwise, we're likely to be playing at the lower end of the market. Pitching-wise, we'll take a look at the pitchers who are available as well. Some pretty prominent names, Bieber, Montgomery, and Snell, both on the market again. Chapman, Clay Holmes, some Ryan Presley, some pretty established relievers as well. Again, most of whom are looking for pretty significant money. Kobe Allard, the left-hander, doesn't look like he's looking for crazy money. He's a guy who looks like he could start or relieve at $1.5 million. That to me is a guy that I'd probably strongly consider bringing on, and probably going to be a somewhat similar situation with the pitchers as there are with the hitters, where we're just going to need to be somewhat patient and maybe check out the lower end of the market, or the players who happen to linger on the market to try to get some value. I mean, we could conceivably make a move for one higher end pitcher or one higher end hitter, but with all the holes that we have to fill, I don't necessarily know that that would be the most prudent approach. I'd like to win more games next year. I'd like to win more games than the 77 that we won this year. I don't know how realistic that is, given that we were a 66-win team according to the numbers, and we've just let probably half of that team hit free agency or trade away, so we've got a lot of holes to fill. I'd like to think that we could get this team up over 70 wins again as we start building out our farm system and building out the organization the way we want it. I just don't know that we need to be making a long-term commitment to anybody. If there was a guy to make a commitment to, it would be a 26-year-old free agent like Juan Soto. But while we do have enough money that we could probably sign him, wouldn't leave us with any money for anybody else. And I just don't think that that would be the right approach, as fun as it would be to have Juan Soto for a third consecutive team, since I had him obviously on my Yankees miniseries. We signed him after 2024 in our Seattle miniseries, but as fun as it would be to have Soto in the lineup for the A's, it's conceivable that he could walk 300 times a year, given the lack of talent around him and his excellent eye. And we'll be spending some time between now and the next episode coming up with a initial plan of how we might want to spend that money. If you've got any ideas, it's always helpful for me to hear them in the comments section down below or off to the right, depending on what type of device you're watching and listening on. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.